delighted to be joined on the show today by documentary filmmakers, director Christopher Griffiths and writer Gary Smart. Hi guys, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks very much for joining me today. Obviously, Chris, I've been speaking to yourself kind of on and off for the past couple of months after I kind of came to your work a wee bit later through the Pennywise documentary, which we will go on to. First off, congratulations obviously to both of you. Just the announcement recently of your latest Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story, coming out in Screenbox on 6th of June. Is that quite an exciting thing for you? Obviously it is.
Yeah, it's very, very, very exciting for us. It's kind of like I think Pennywise was exciting, but this seems to be on another level for us at the moment because obviously the subject matter itself, and there's kind of a really big kind of like promotion that Screambox are doing for it. So yeah, really exciting.
Yeah,
and it's your baby as well, isn't it, Gary? You know, that's what I've got to make sure is said as well in this, because it's always that thing like, ooh, who gets what credit for what? But this, like, we all have those things which are, you know, right, this is Gary's one, this is my one. We always come together to do it. But I feel I should set the record straight from the start. That Gary's the one who's got the, to be frank, biggest boner for Mr. England. Sorry, this is okay to speak like this on here, is it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, Robert's not going to listen.
So yeah, it's a huge thing, as you're saying, Chris. Gary, Screenbox are doing a big sort of campaign for it. They have someone I've got kind of decent contacts with. I got the Outwaters through as well, so I look forward to seeing that when it comes out. Obviously, I think you're still trying to sort of a kind of UK deal. I don't know how these things work. I'm total layman with that.
What normally happens, obviously, you do, you know, unfortunately, as British filmmakers, you know, the way the game goes now is obviously that the US is obviously the biggest market for the first kind of initial push. So so the US will be first, but I can't see it being too long after in regards to the UK, just because again the subject matter and how big the doc is. I know it's getting a theatrical release as well in the States. I think it's going to get one over here as well. So
nice.
I think the next few months we'll probably have some news and it probably roll quite fast then.
Mm-hmm.
This is new territory for us. Well, I say new territory for us, but we've been doing this now for, coming up 10 years at the end of this year.
Cool.
And only really kind of just post-COVID or sort of during the course of COVID, because we've always sort of, how do I put this, Gary? Operated under the radar. Yeah. But we were sort of very much an independent outfit. And, you know, in the measure of our success up to this point was releasing our documentaries on physical media, getting them manufactured in China, legitimate Blu-rays, I'll add, but basically them being shipped out from our offices, which was Gary and Adam's house, and having stacks of boxes in their toilets as their warehouse, and then getting to work with the likes of sort of Arrow, Second Sight, Screen Factory,
yeah.
That's kind of like how we've operated for years, isn't it? You know, like, yes, we're legit. We're working with these companies doing their bonus features or having our work acquired by them. But really, this whole thing now, like, international distribution and this and that, it's like, okay. I mean, I'm the creative. Gary has to sort of deal with a lot of the admin side of the business. He's way more business-minded than I am. But it's exciting, but still, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I guess that's how it works. Whatever that person says goes.
I think as Chris said, I think, you know, with our other documentaries, we had lots of kind of control over them. You know, they're our babies, you know, how they were released, how they were packaged, what the extras were, it was all down to us. We kind of lose control a little bit of that now in terms of, you know, we can tell them what the bonus feature is going to be, but we can't say when it's going to be released. We can't say really how it's going to be released.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's what we've kind of learned really since the days of doing the campaigns back, you know, 5-6 years ago on Pennywise and RoboDoc, stuff like that, that, you know, the intentions we set out to do many years ago, obviously we have a little control over it now. So we learned a lot from Pennywise. We're hopefully some of the kind of mistakes we made on Pennywise regards to the campaign and stuff like that, you know, and the physical rewards, hopefully we can resolve on this one, because one, we've learned a lot, and two, we've got a little more say now because our relationship has grown with Screenbox in particular.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've announced they're doing RoboDoc as well for us as a 4-part series. So it's kind of like, we're kind of in bed with them now. So we've got a little bit of sway. We can swing our dicks a little bit now, more than we could 2 years ago with them. So, yeah.
I mean, it's just an ever-changing landscape as well. That's the other big thing, I think, for us.
Mm-hmm.
If you think the last, particularly post-COVID, and it was around for years before, but the whole streaming thing, that definitely, well, it was around, I guess, in 2013, 14.
Yeah, probably not so much for these kind of projects. Yeah.
And now, we've seen how it's sort of how priorities have been rearranged a bit for the market.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Streaming comes first, but both in a good way, and in a bad way. That is, in that, the physical media has to happen, because thank God for this genre. And this whole thing of fans and everything, like, no, I want my, physical copy up on my shelf.
Yeah.
But that's probably where there's been just, with the Pennywise release was, one thing I've got to say in terms of documentaries overall is we were way too wide-eyed at the start with all this. Like, oh my God, I think we made, 14,000 or something for our Kickstarter campaign for the Hellraiser documentary.
Mm-hmm.
£14,000 or something. Yeah. It was like second part of production phase, but you think, God, you can do everything with that. In retrospect now, £14,000, and that's not to us personally, I'll add. And this industry is like, oh mate, that's just pocket change. Yeah. So we kind of we've always been adventurous with what we think we can do with money, but then the reality kind of sets in. Like,
I think that, as Chris said, how things kind of developed for us. You look at even Brewster was about 17 grand, and we put some money in ourselves from Leviathan, so it's probably cost about 30 grand, I reckon. Brewster did, which was a lot of money to us then. But you think about Pennywise, we raised 33 grand. It's cost us 150 to make. Yeah, so when people are shouting, kind of abuse us, we're not getting it out, or we've taken their $30 for a Blu-ray. We've actually invested, a significant amount of money ourselves in this project to get it out and get it right. So that's been a massive kind of difference for us, having to go, shit, we have to spend our own money and we have to kind of find investors outside of campaigns. So kind of all the kind of like the buzz of the doc coming out now, it's how can I put it? A part of it is, it's great and it's amazing, but then we still got the business side of it to worry about, and we still got the countless emails off people going, where's my Blu-ray? When we're going, okay, we're just trying to get this thing out and finished.
Yeah.
So it's a little sting a little bit, but we are really proud of it. I think I was with Chris last week and we shot a bonus feature for the Blu-ray, like a director's introduction or conversation, and it was kind of just fun. You kind of talking about the doc again after all this time of post and being around Chris's house like every weekend for like 6 or 7 weeks, and just sit there and have a bit of a laugh with it and just chat about it. It was quite nice, as opposed to sitting next to a computer.
Yeah,
it's probably been the easiest one as well.
Yeah.
Ironically, the Englund one, of all the projects we've definitely got our stories and our scars from all the projects, but ironically, I think the Englund one's the most. I don't know what it is. It's just been the most streamlined. I think it's developing. I think it's the development of skills. Sounding really up our own asses, that, but you're only going to get better each time and learn from mistakes.
Yeah,
but I don't know. We just sort of found this confidence and hit this sort of flow. I think it's the closest Gary and I have worked on a project together since the days of Hellraiser.
Yeah, probably.
I was just a young buck, kind of. He pretty much had his hand up my ass.
Literally.
I carry on saying that quickly, shouldn't I? But as I was kind of making edits and everything for the bonus features on that, I was just a puppet at that point, or just learning. Whereas now we're kind of, there's a great back and forth we've had. So as Gary said, he's become my second wife in recent years. So while my pregnant wife is in the living room tending to life situations, Gary and I are up in the man cave. But to be honest, it's a great thing, but at the same time, it's bloody knackering. We've put the hours in. It's always in that last run where you're like, right, we've got to get this over the line by a week's time. Mm-hmm. We certainly had the odd session, which I think the one weekend was like we were up till 3 on the Friday, 4 on the Saturday, and it was bank holiday. It was the Queen's Jubilee, wasn't it? Funeral.
Queen's funeral.
So what's that one? Yeah, something.
Yeah, big kind of
But we were up until somewhere in the region of 5-6 o'clock on the Sunday. That's it, because
Right.
thank God we had the money off. So that part's ruthless, but nonetheless, of all the projects, the politics and everything like that, and the scale, the Englund one was like, shit, that was quite easy by comparison.
Yeah.
But,
so going just back to the start then, 10 years ago, as you said, it was Leviathan, the story of Hellraiser 3.
No,
a movie I've not...
No, Story of Hellraiser and Hellbound Hellraiser 2.
All right, it's down wrong in the IMDb then. I've misread that.
Yeah, no, we did a bonus feature we did on the third one. It's probably listed as well on there.
Right, so it is. Yeah. Aye, okay.
Welcome to see that back up again, mate.
Yeah, you can read it. Do your research better next time.
Apologies. I can only go by IMDb. It's either that or Wikipedia. And I think IMDb is the best one. But,
it's the first two films.
Yeah, so what was your kind of thoughts going into documentary filmmaking for the two of you? Really, like, was that something you had always wanted to do? It's like I've usually the first guys I've interviewed in terms of documentary filmmakers, it's just been feature directors I've interviewed before, so they'll go on about, we had this sort of inspiration. Was it certain documentaries you'd seen growing up, or was it you wanted to kind of put your own stamp on a style of documentary filmmaking? What was it?
I mean, so I'll go from my end, Gary, and obviously I'll let you say your part. It probably starts with Gary, this, to be honest, but from my end, in terms of like the inspiration side, I mean, I certainly want to be doing some more narrative work, but I think being of that age group, thank God, where we'd watched films on VHS for all those years, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, DVD comes around, and oh my God, that was my first port of call. Terminator came out, RoboCop, Chainsaw Massacre. It was straight to like these documentaries. And I don't know, it was just an instant click for me, in terms of it's so cool seeing all these people who I loved, they look old. Probably shouldn't say that. You see that and just digging deep. I can chat until the cows come home about all my films. God knows I've bored my friends and family about RoboCop my whole life. Yeah. So in a way, it's kind of cathartic to be like, right, well, let's justify all this useless knowledge and put it into, a documentary form. But I wouldn't be doing this had I, here we go, kiss ass statement, met Gary. And I'll let Gary kind of come from his end, really. It was just a very fortunate chance meeting, really, which kind of culminated in the start, really, of Dead Mouse Productions. So over to you, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, like Chris, I was kind of like, at an age where, DVD was coming out and I used to love the bonus features. I used to love behind the scenes. I think being a big kind of effects kind of like fan, I always liked watching the bonus features about the special effects, about how things were made and the makeup, stuff like that. So it was always interesting to me. I like crime documentaries as well, that kind of stuff. But I never, ever thought I'd be doing it in any way. So what kind of happened for me was, very, very briefly, is I, myself and a chap called Christian Sellers wrote a book on the Return of the Living Dead, about making that film. That only came about because I became friends with Beverly Randolph, one of the actresses, and also Don Kaufer, who became a real close friend of myself, Adam and Chris's in the end. And because we got chatting to Don had come over to the UK. We kind of, let's do a book on the making of these films. My favourite film. We got friendly most of the cast and crew, and it kind of developed there. We had it published in the UK and in the States, became quite popular. A nemesis, but now friend, called Mikey Perez, who was kind of repping the Return of the Dead cast at conventions, and we didn't get on at all, me and Mikey. We hated each other. He was doing documentaries on Never Sleep Again, Nightmare on Elm Street. I think he did one, his name is Jason. So he was already doing those kind of docs. And they decided to do one called More Brains, The Return to the Living Dead. And I think because it was easier for them just to contact me and Christian and say, do you want to write it? Because we already written the book. It was kind of a quick kind of like, project. And it's quite easy for us to do, really, because obviously we all had a narrative in there. But by doing that, I learned how to do kind of like the script structures, really, and how a documentary works, particularly how, I shouldn't really say, but how, you might answer a question on one thing, but then later on in the doc, we need a response from you. And we have to kind of salvage where we can different responses. And I thought at the time, that's really naughty doing that. But, I was told to do it on that doc, but it actually really works because, sometimes, you really need someone to say something. You just haven't got them to say it, but they might have said something. And Chris is brilliant at finding stuff like that, Chris is. So anyway, that was kind of happening, bubbling away. I did this documentary called More Brains. It was quite successful, won the Saturn Award, and it was out in the States. It was licensed in the UK a few times. And then I started doing screenings of films in Birmingham, a place called the Custard Factory. And I invited Don over to do a screening of Return of the Living Dead. And then that went really well. Chris came to that. Chris was just a normal punter. He came, and I don't know what it is, when you meet somebody, you kind of click, don't you, straight away with somebody. And Chris was a bit of a cheeky side, because Chris had to leave early from the show, and he was going to miss Don's autographs and the signings and the Q&A. So Chris just grabbed me in the foyer and said, obviously you the organizer, blah blah blah. Do you mind? Is there any way I can meet Don, early before I go? And I was really friendly with Don, so Chris went backstage, met Don, got his autograph and a photograph, and we just kind of connected on Facebook then. But again, it's kind of thing when you meet somebody for the first time and you really connect with them. Don't get all big-headed, Chris.
No, I scream for music to kick in. Soundtrack, romantic music from Bonfire.
You do, and so you fall for him. But something about Chris I really liked. I don't know what it was about him. I just really liked him. He was, back then he was even more kind of like, eager and excitable. He's got more grumpy of his old age, but he was like really keen to talk about the films and whatnot. So anyway, after we did a screen of Hellraiser 1 and 2, and we invited the cast there. We had Simon Bamford, and we had Kenneth Cranham, Jeff Portas, Nicholas Vince to come and do a screen of that. Went really well. And then I, by luck, got in chance with Brian Cox, the actor from Succession now. But obviously back then, he was really known for like X-Men 2, but also he was the first Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. And Brian was doing some filming in Birmingham. And I managed to just, reach out to his people, and he agreed to come and do a screening of Manhunter and the film Trick or Treat. And I knew Chris was a big Manhunter fan because of his Facebook posts. I knew his dad was a big fan as well, because, typical when you become friends with one person and then suddenly his dad's interested in film. His dad added me, or I added his dad, and that kind of develops into, as film fans, really, not anything creepy. It's more, trying to find a picture of his mum. But no, his dad's a huge film fan as well, so we got chatting. And then Chris came and did the interview for that, and it went really well again. And then we just sat there one day, and I just said to these people we were working with at the time, why don't you do a documentary on Hellraiser? And because no one else has done it. It's a British film, 1 and 2. Well, primarily British. It was filmed over here, mainly British cast and crew. We know the people now. We've got the key people in, Cenobites and the makeup guy who created Pinhead. Let's just do this doc. And it kind of was a bit silly idea, and it kind of evolved. And politics got involved, and the guys we were working with disappeared. And then I asked Chris to get involved. Chris was only meant to be involved in a very small bit, really, because the other guys didn't want him. It was just basically just going to come and help, do a bit of kind of like B-roll and stuff like that. But then me and Chris kind of took it over then, because Chris was enthusiastic, and obviously he knew he wanted to get into documentaries and filming. And then our friendship developed, and then we ended up going to the States, and that's what it was basically. Long story short, and we, Adam obviously was involved as well, our co-director of the company. We became really close friends, and that's how it kind of started from Hellraiser, and then it's spiraled then to obviously Brewster and so on. That was a really kind of long, shortish story.
That's great. So, what I find quite interesting, Gary, obviously, in terms of writing for a documentary, what is the kind of process behind that? Is it seems quite, again, I'm just going over being a very layman in terms of what I know about documentary filmmaking. You're saying about like scripts and things like that. Is it kind of trying to angle guests into certain discussion points, or how does the writing work for that?
The writing is really weird. I mean, obviously, I've dabbled a little bit in some narrative, and Chris did with me on one of my projects. But that's a lot different when you do that. When you're writing a script, obviously, with characters. Writing for a doc's really difficult because you're not really writing. Really, I think the writing comes in the edit. Basically, you've got an idea of the structure of a documentary you want, and most documentaries follow the same structure. In terms of any film, is obviously pre-production, production, post-production, legacy. It's pretty simple, really. And within that, you get the director coming on board, you get the writers, you obviously get the casting, and that's a long process. Obviously, in a doc, the casting process, how each actor was obviously picked for their role. makeup and that kind of stuff. So you kind of have a narrative structure there, and then you ask questions based on that narrative structure, and obviously through research as well, knowing what people do. Now, the biggest fuck up we made on Leviathan was, and it's probably my fault, wasn't Chris's. Chris wasn't involved in the writing stage at that point. Was I asked every single question, same question to every single person. So we went in and we'd interview people for 4 hours, and we didn't, have 30 pages of questions. And the problem with that is, one, most people, their stories develop over the years because they've heard stories at conventions, and it's not really their story. They weren't really there, but they're telling somebody else's story. And the usual crap is, what was it like working so and so? What was it like with that person? And then what you do then is you have to go through all that. You have to transcribe the interviews. And back then, obviously, he was actually listening and typing. It isn't like it is now. Chris has found a very ingenious way of obviously transcribing now. But back then, it was literally sitting there with a pair of headphones and typing, and then putting time codes in. And it took months to do. What you do then is you then, on a script edit, you put the headers for each topic you want to discuss. You put pre-production, casting, directors, and then you go through every single transcribe and find where someone's talking about that to a line from somebody, and then you put it into the script. And again, this is where we've learned a lot, because on a script, when you're reading it from a Word document, it sounds great, the narrative flows, but when you actually go to edit it, it's a completely different beast, because someone's personality might not come across. Someone's previous person might be really fast at talking and energetic. The person's really slow and low. There's a couple of ums and ahs in there. People don't finish their sentences properly. They go into the next sentence too quick. So that's where Chris, I think, particularly has developed his skills, obviously, in editing. So I think that the writing, obviously, is important for the structure. Of course it is. But then the writing comes in the edit, the actual editing, because you're then writing with your fingers. Sounds stupid. You're going through it and you're finding kind of key moments and pacing and, and moving stuff around. So I think that's where we've all developed. And I know the people we worked with on Leviathan, it was 7 hours long, because the editors took it from the script straight onto the page, from the page straight onto the screen, and it just didn't flow well. So me and Chris, when we had to do a new version of Leviathan for the Arrow cut, we obviously then developed our own kind of style on that then, and it worked a lot better. And he worked on Fright Night. I think it's worked like with Pennywise to a degree. We had a couple of writers on Pennywise and a couple of other people involved in that. This one has worked kind of breeze, really. I think because we had an editor working with us on Hollywood Dreams. He gave us a very rough baseline edit. Did a brilliant job on that. Then Chris came in, because what I think Chris is really good at bigging him up. I think he's good at finding humour. And that's the most important thing in documentaries, is finding humour. It's finding the person's personality. And I think maybe a little bit if I'm being honest, I don't think we find that too much in Pennywise too much. I think because, again, it's the nature of that doc is a little bit different to some of the other docs we've done. Brewster was really a funny, kind of like energetic comic style. So if everyone's always energetic, everyone's like talking. When we interview people on Pennywise and we're asking about phobia of clowns and childhood fears, it kind of, they get very serious in their conversations. It's kind of hard to find it. So I think that's what Chris is brilliant at. He's finding just little movements from people and little comments they make and little laughs here and there. So that's where the writing comes into it. It's a very strange process. But I really enjoyed working, as Chris said, on Hollywood Dreams, the latter stage of it, because we sat in Chris's and we kind of wrote it together. He hasn't got a credit, actually, he should have done. But we wrote it together in the edit room, just sitting there. He can't have too many credits because his name was repeated a million times. So that's kind of getting. You're going to get long answers off me and Chris, but that's kind of it. It's a weird process writing, and it's kind of it's a strange. I'd love to have another name for it, for a doc. I don't know what you could call us. Director's a weird thing for a documentary about directors, I think, as well, because again, the directing comes through the edit as well to a degree. So it's a very strange kind of like. Film is quite easy to give people roles in film. Very clear what a director does, what a producer does, very clear what a writer does, an editor. It isn't really as black and white on documentaries. And I think sometimes people are involved in our projects but don't get the credit they deserve. And some people do get credit where they didn't deserve because it's pigeonholed. So that's kind of it. Yeah. Nobody on this project, of course, maybe previous projects.
Yeah. And Chris, kind of similar for yourself, as Gary said as well, the directing side is obviously very different. It's not like well, again, coming from not knowing, it's not really setting up a scene between two actors that are kind of playing off each other as well. How's the directing style? What are the kind of challenges you face in that with documentaries?
Yeah, I'd say it's going on like what Gary's point is. It is hard to kind of pinpoint what a director is, and we've evolved certain projects with. I was directing it. Actually, it's two of us directing it now, and I think in most cases that's absolutely fair.
Aye.
For me, what I kind of perceive the initial thing, certainly as director, is all right. I'm the interviewer, and I think the element of directing that comes in is okay. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to give me an answer. Cool. And that's how I started off doing it with Leviathan. I think I was the interviewer for most of them. But obviously I was new to it all. So I'm just reading off a sheet the questions Gary wrote. I think the key thing I learned, my dad actually had met Mark Commode not long before at an event. And so I got his autograph. And what his autograph said, it was just before Brian Cox, actually. It was like, he told him what I was doing. I was going to interview Brian Cox. And he said, the key thing of interviewing is make sure you pay attention to the interviewee. Which I know it's obvious, but it is fundamental. And believe you me, I've had a moment in the past or two where because I've operated some jobs, I've actually sort of done the camera, the sound, the lights. We're very, very guerrilla in our approach, or have been in the past. And that moment you kind of like go, your attention goes that way. I'll come back and ask them a question. They'll go, so what was it like working on the film? They're like, I've just answered that. You're like, oh, shit. So absolutely fundamental to pay attention. But I was just literally initially asking questions on the sheet, get the answer, on to the next one. As time's progressed, and what I love about this, editing, the directing part, everything about it, is it's the whole learning process. Right, I'm not going to do that again. And both being the interviewer and the editor on these projects, I want to kick my ass so much sometimes in the edit. I'm like, why didn't you get them to say this? Why didn't you get them to say that? So there is like an element of manufacturing I do now. And that's only a slight bit. But one, it's about the delivery, I think. And most people are really keen. Sometimes you catch people who you interview, on the wrong day, they're tired or whatever, and ultimately they're doing us a favor. So you've got to respect that. But the more you get an idea of what the final edit's going to look like, you're like, I need this is the cusp now. This is where it's all entertaining. This person really needs to say this energetically. So I will have to say, look, I'll give them context to what I want them to say back to me. I'm like, all right, look, this was a big thing. The film was huge and successful. So how did that make you feel? How did this, but project that, because it's all well and good hearing the facts. So I think that's what, I think Leviathan, we lucked out a bit with a number of people on that documentary. But in other cases, I'm like, why didn't we push certain people to give us a bit more of a hyped up answer? So that's definitely one element, I think, in the directing of a documentary, is the actual interviewing. Was it you act, they react kind of thing. So that's what I quite enjoy doing there. And then I suppose, again, it's the editing is a big part, because it's the overall feel, the pace of the documentary. Getting involved in the music, I love doing that lately now. Because like, right, it's good. This is the motion. It's really corny to put it this way, but these projects at times just make themselves. You're kind of like riding a wave. You're going like, okay, cool, right, we're going into a bit of a lull here. Yep, cool, right. Musically, this is where it's going to go, and then right, you need a beat, and now because I think like that in terms of the edit, I'm taking that back to the interviews. I can sort of get a gauge, a sense now of like, whereas before sounds again corny, I didn't have a vision before. I was just doing what was on the page. Whereas now I'm like, no, this is, I've got more of an idea of what the end product is. And I think it's important to have that in a way as well. And I'm sure, I know, as an example, I know George Romero came from the editing world before he became a director.
Yep.
And I hear sort of anecdotes like that. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see why a lot of editors might get into directing, because they see the final product and they might have an opinion of either their own work or someone else's, where it's like, if only you'd just done that. So it's all about like coverage, performance, and, even little things like you tell people at the start of an interview, I need you to put the question in the answer, the context, what was it like working on this film? Don't just say to me it was great or terrible. Working on the film was, So at times where someone's giving you some gold dust, and this is where it's important to pay attention, I sometimes like to give them an open platform to just, look, I'll start this off, you go renegade. And we've had a few people like that, Lance Henriksen on this, Eli Roth, that guy, those guys, you just literally almost go, 2 hours later, you're like, question. So no, you answered question 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you're paying attention, you need to kind of almost know what it's going to be like in the edit, or try and gauge it. So you might have to backtrack a bit and say, "Oh, can you say this again like that?" And that's the kind of element of manufacturing. And if you've really got a strong idea, like, "Oh my god, this will work really well," I think Peter Weller for RoboDoc, hopefully we sort of nailed, because the edit of RoboDoc, or one edit of it, was already done. So for Eastwood and I on that project, my co-director there, we were able to say, we know what's there already. How do we get Weller to fill the gaps in a way? And we've got this person saying that about you. What do you have to say to that? And we knew how it was going to work, and ultimately it did in the end. So sometimes it's quite fortunate when you have like these belated interviews and you've got all the other materials together. You can go, oh, I know exactly what to do, but it's trying to guess that up front now. And I think, Gary said these things find themselves in the edits. I know I keep badgering on at him about, like, the next one. I really want to kind of like map out roughly how it's going to go. But sometimes you're just at the mercy of
I think what Chris said really important. I think what I've just picked up Ben, and it's kind of really true, is that it's how you as an interviewer behave in front of the interviewee. If you're sitting there very solemn and very serious, they tend to be very solemn and serious. If you're energetic and you break the ice, a few laughs, a bit of banter, they do kind of react to that. And I think that's what we kind of tried to do on this one more than maybe Pennywise, that we kind of like really broke the ice with people, and we had a chat to them. We really showed we were interested in them. I know one of the interviewees, I won't mention his name, turned up in a foul mood, not because of us, because I think a tree fell down in his garden literally before he arrived, but he still managed to come, despite all that happening, and he was in a right foul mood. We just started chatting and having a laugh about this tree and whatnot, and just kind of broke the ice. And he gave a really good interview, and you could tell in the interview as well, he was quite energetic in it. And I think we've really learned that we want that person to be moving around in that chair as opposed to just be very stiff. It depends on the doc you're doing, but our docs, we want to be fun and interesting. So it's really important as an interviewer, as a director, that you are directing that person in body language more than anything as well, I think.
And you've mentioned, obviously, with RoboDoc, you've got Peter Weller, Pennywise, you had Tim Curry. In the Englund doc, is Robert Englund, I'm sure, did you speak to him in it as well?
Yeah,
of course. I've seen the trailer, but
we had 4 interviews with Robert.
Nice,
like 9 hours of interview footage, I think it was.
And how is that? Just because obviously you guys being fans of these movies and these actors growing up and getting that kind of face-to-face time with them. Chris, I seen you put a thing on Twitter the other day about being able to share a cigarette with Tim Curry out in his garden. Like that, is that quite surreal feeling at that point?
It's incredible. I mean, like, I think you kind of take for granted after a while. I think the thing is, when you're in a project, when you do a series of interviews one after another, you get a bit like, oh yeah, this is just day-to-day life for us now for 4 weeks. You sort of start to act the part. But I think when it comes to, and that's not at all to put down all the others, but when you see like the face of a poster, Robert Englund, your Tim Currys, your Peter Wellers, Doug Bradley's, and all that, I mean, to be honest, I think the one I always remember the most, or a couple, but was like when we went to see Paul Verhoeven for RoboDoc. Now, in this instance, he's prolific. I love his films. He's got the holy trinity of RoboCop, Total Recall, Starship Troopers. I do like Showgirls, but different reasons. But we had heard the stories about him in the run-up, and he admits it himself, but the guy was a tyrant on the set of RoboCop. So we were having this picture built of him, like, oh God, right? I'm anxious as hell now. He's a provocateur and this and that. And I'll never forget that moment of time when we had to travel up to, was it Malibu? Malibu way. And, we had about an hour and a bit to kill. So we went to like a breakfast house, and it was about 5, 6 of us just sat in that breakfast house.
Yeah.
I think some people were just casually chatting away, but I know probably Gary was the same, but certainly for me, I just felt that like, I need to go outside and have a cigarette. Do you know what I mean? Like the tension build. The same happened with Tim Curry because we went to his house. And in all instances, I think it's that age-old thing, isn't it? They all piss and shit the same as us. So you've got to have that in your mind, I think, for the most part. And then hope that you can kind of, like Gary said, chip away a bit. Because that's the thing, going on the directing thing again. And for all of us and for the project, you know, if you go in to an interview, someone's in a bad mood or someone's putting up a bit of a brick wall, it's gonna, for my 2 cents, it's gonna show on the film. So it's always, it's quite fun. It's like, it's just charming them, and I think it's quite good in a way being foreigners when we go to these places, because we're like, oh hello, oh we're all like Hugh Grant, oh bollocks, bugger. You know, we kind of put on this like act in a way. I think we all up the Britishness ever so slightly. You're like, see, we're not like all the other assholes around you. That's not to say the people around them are assholes, but we kind of play that card a bit when we meet them. So I've definitely developed a few lumps in my pants before interviews. I think I left my phone, didn't I, in
Tim Curry
11, just before Tim Curry. My mind was so preoccupied. We pulled up outside his house about 20 minutes early, and we're all sat there like, right, got your stuff? Oh, it was all the kids. And then I just went, fuck, and I knew exactly why I'd done it afterwards. I'd left my fucking phone on an ice cold coffee machine or whatever because I was just so anxious. And then once you get into it with them, you again, sounds so cheesy, but you just get into the moment with them, and that's what I really like, you know. Unless you have technical hiccups, which that can obviously affect an interview. Yeah, you know, sorry, camera's not on, or someone's not bothered to put the B cam on. Historically, we've had that before. Won't mention any names. But yeah, we did. I still feel the hype, and maybe it's more afterwards. I think everything like that, when you have a big moment, you know, when you've gone to a concert or you've seen something or someone, or you know, you've been to a festival, whatever. It's only after the fact you're like, holy shit, I did that. How exciting it is. At the time, it's almost just like, right, there's a job to do. We've got to get this done. I think the paranoia, in a way, you know, and the anxieties kind of kick in, and the job that's got to be done. It's afterwards, you're like, holy shit. And that's why, like you said, with that, you know, getting to have a cigarette with Tim Curry in his back garden. At the time, I was probably still a bit like, oh, thank fuck. Well, we got the footage. I mean, let's make sure it gets back to a hard drive first. Yeah. But I knew the job was done. But I think it was only afterwards like, holy shit, I just had a cigarette with Tim Curry. So you kind of dwell it. That's why I think a lot of people do these posts, don't they? Like, this was me 10 years ago next to so-and-so. It's like, yes, you've told that fucking story. I'm very much guilty of it myself. Yeah.
Especially, I think, with someone like him who, obviously, because he's health problems and everything, he doesn't get seen in the public eye as much as he would have done before. Obviously, before I came to Pennywise, I hadn't seen a trailer or anything for it. I think it was just the poster that caught my attention that made me want to see it. And so I wasn't even sure if Tim Curry would be in it, because you can never tell. He's been out of the public eye for so long, and it's really great to kind of see him in that and hearing kind of his stories from it, because I think it could have been, if he hadn't had Tim Curry, I might have felt maybe like an element missing from it, but getting him there.
When we did the doc, he wasn't even doing conventions then. I mean, he's doing shows now, but he wasn't doing them then. So, I mean, this was 2016. I think he had his stroke in 2012. So, you know, it wasn't really that far after his stroke. And it was kind of, when we kind of discussed doing it, we had obviously the footage from Bart Mixon, who's the makeup guy, who had hours of footage for us. But I think there was a conversation now, if we didn't get Tim, would we do the doc? Because we'd been kind of burnt a little bit on the Hellraiser, because we were promised Clive, and then we were promised Clive, and then that was Clive, and he wasn't very well at the time. So, and it kind of, you know, I can probably say now, lots of politics and bullshit was going on behind the scenes with his people who have now left his organisation. So we didn't get him in the end, and that was a real sour taste for us, really, because we got a bit of criticism. And it's like we've tried everything possible to get him. You know, sometimes you do everything possible, and you still can't get these people. So I think when there was a conversation about Tim maybe not doing it without him, but then we got him. Even one of the first people to sign up, Tim was, and he signed up because it was about Pennywise and not Rocky Horror. That was basically it. He'd never been. No one ever spoke to him about Pennywise. It was all Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I think that's why he was interested in doing it. It was something different. So and we've done other docs. Obviously, we've not had key players. I mean, we didn't have Weller for 5 years until the very end. But I think he would have still worked without him, because I think people would have known at the time maybe of obviously his condition. And what probably wouldn't have helped us long term was because he started doing conventions in the UK as well. He was doing, For the Love of Horror, he was doing lots in the States.
Yeah.
So that's when it gets, it would have been maybe a bit more difficult for us then.
And have you, obviously, Stephen King is notorious for his opinions on his own people that have adapted his movies, or his books, sorry. Do you know, has he seen the doc?
Stephen King's got an opinion on every single horror film that comes out now.
He does, yeah.
Fucking any film comes out, it's the scariest film I've made. This guy said that Pet Sematary remake was the scariest film he's ever watched.
Yeah.
How much did you pay for that? I've had half a glass of wine. We tried him. I think John Campopiano, who had done Pet Sematary doc, reached out to his people to ask him, did he want to be involved? Again, he's notoriously doesn't get involved in these kind of projects. He wants to remake one of his films where he's got a cameo, and being paid a fortune. So he kind of said no straight away to us. And again, what we said from day one was, even though obviously the book is really important, because obviously you wouldn't have the TV series about the book, we all said from day one this was Tommy Lee Wallace's story, and he was director. He wrote the script, obviously, with Larry Cohen. It was kind of his vision, obviously, with Bart. So I think having Tommy on board kind of really kind of like got rid of the sour taste regards to Stephen. And I think the problem with having Stephen King in it would have been the very beginning only. With that first kind of chapter of the doc would have been that only, and then it goes straight into it. So it would have been much very short bit. I don't know if he's watched it or not. I think John maybe said that he'd spoken to his people and that he was going to watch it. We've never had any feedback.
Shrink wrapped on his shelf.
Yeah, I mean,
any copies we give out to people and things. Yeah, you still haven't watched it yet? Fine.
We don't do it for it sounds really kind of corny now. We're fans of film. We use the word aficionado, but we are. We love film. We love dissecting film. We love doing these projects. So these projects for us are for the fans. And we piss people off all the time when we miss deadlines, but we genuinely do it for the people like us who love film. And we do it. People want to be part of it. This Pennywise in particular, I think, is a love letter to Tim, and it's a love letter to Bart and to Tommy Lee as well. And obviously, this documentary on Robert, obviously, is dedicated completely to him, because obviously he's a subject matter, and he's still alive to kind of get it. Most of these documentaries on actors are made years after they pass away. Why do that? Why not do it when they're alive? Why not celebrate their career and their legacy? Why they're still here? Because I know it's going to happen with this doc. When it comes out, there'll be an announcement in 6 months' time. Robert's doing something else, and he's in another show. And obviously, there's another chapter of his life then, which we haven't covered.
Yeah.
But he's still a prolific actor, with Stranger Things and cameo stuff like that. So
we can get a fifth interview then, Gary. Don't worry.
Yeah, we'll do a bonus.
We already picked up the pieces in situ.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if if these people watch it. We know when we do the docs, obviously, that we know that Bart Minson loved it. We know Robert loved the Sitges version of Hollywood Dreams. We know obviously that like the cast and crew, love what we do. So we always get really nice feedback off people. We've never had anybody go, "What the fuck have you just done? Why did you portray me in this way?" Because we're not there to make sensationalize it. Yeah, we're not here to do that. We're here to celebrate the film.
Yeah,
we're not here to badmouth the films either. So, like example of Pennywise, we all know the spider's shit. We all know that. We all know that it wasn't done, as it should have been executed. But we now know that it wasn't Bart's fault.
Yeah,
it wasn't Tommy Lee Wallace's fault. There was lots of other reasons why that spider looked shit. Because when you look at the behind the scenes footage, it looks amazing. The spider does. And again, they didn't realize how important Tim was going to be to the film or the series, until after it came out. So hopefully, we kind of like people watch it and go, maybe have a little bit more love for that spider at the end now, knowing what it could have been.
Well, it's one of the things we did. I always remember that. There was a discussion I think that was had, wasn't it, at the time with Bart's interview. we'll talk about the spider, and maybe for some people it's like, oh, you shouldn't venture down there. It's almost like, it's a bit taboo. But the main thing for me is I don't want to make a puff piece. You've got to sort of show the ins and outs of it being like a slog to get to where they got to. And, I'm hoping come the time we've got it out there is like RoboCop 3. You say RoboCop 3 to any film fan and you're instantly going to get a reaction off them. But I think it's still cool to cover them, but let's not sugarcoat shit. Let's be honest. But at the end of the day, it's people doing a job. Then I don't think people deliberately go out to sabotage things.
Mm-hmm.
They hey, look, we tried it, it failed, whatever, but let's find out why, and what people's views are. And so I think we got with the spider thing, for Pennywise, I think we had one bit of feedback off someone saying it was too long, that section. It was like, well, watching it again, to be honest, I think actually, no, you've got to dedicate the time. And in fact, what I was taught by someone was what's called the shit sandwich on any topic, where say something, you have a nice little cluster of positives. Let's go into the dirt and, it's fucking horrible, or that person's an asshole. But then let's come back around and go, but at the end of the day, it was that, as long as you do it in a respectful manner, it's always worth just covering the warts and all in that respect. I don't think there's any stones we've really left unturned in that respect, is there?
Yeah. And I think with everyone knows about the spider from the end of the TV movie, so it's important to give it its time and give it its kind of its due or its criticism, as you're saying. It's something that's important.
And all that BTS footage we got as well. It's like, it's got to go somewhere. And and if anything, thank God. That's one of my favorite parts when we do these as well, is the whole digging out of the dirt. Like, oh my God, we've got these never before seen. We actually paid to have them digitized dailies from RoboCop.
Nice.
And so that's always one of the struggles, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of editing. Otherwise, people look like Thunderbirds because they've been chopped up so much in the dialogue edit that you need coverage. And so when you've got a wealth of material like we did for Pennywise, all that behind the scenes, the fair, the spider footage, well, let's utilize it, because I think that's what, certainly what I look for in docs. What are you going to show me that I've never seen before? And I think it's always quite, apart from that, Gary. That's what I do enjoy. There you go, full glass of wine. But that's why I always enjoy it. Like, holy shit, you found this and that, and when these studios announced, like, I don't know, Screen Factory, it was only a VHS print, but of Exorcist 3. That's what gets the fans going, really, is when, holy shit, you found that thing,
Yeah, I think my favourite kind of scene involving the spider bit is when they're talking about. I can't remember. It wasn't a stuntman that went inside the spider, was it?
Brent Baker, he got bruised.
They just chucked him off the side or something, and then we forgot about the metal bars that were inside it. It's quite an oversight there. You wouldn't even bother if that went wrong. That was quite interesting again, but it was. He seemed to love. Being a part of the spider, as you're saying, the shit sandwich. You speak about his involvement and the kind of making of that part of the movie, and it was really cool.
The really sad thing about that is, obviously, Brent hadn't been interviewed about that before, and we had that footage of Brent obviously inside it as well. And unfortunately, Brent passed away not long after we did the doc. So but now his story's out there. Do you mean? And fans know who Brent is, and he died quite young, really, but he wasn't very well. But it's kind of like, I think that's what we like doing as well. We've got Gene Warren Jr. in it as well, who passed away. Most of our people passed away. But it's their stories being told, isn't it, Ben? It's like where they'd never have had a chance to talk about that. Now they're on something, on a documentary, which is obviously now, with Pennywise, obviously it's successful and it's been seen across the world, and that story's been shared now, finally.
Yeah. A couple of last wee bits before I let you go. Obviously, you've got the England one coming out. Is Gary, Chris, you were saying for Gary, this was he was the kind of driving force for this. Gary, what was it like getting to kind of see, well, it sounds a bit of a cliched line, but kind of see behind the mask almost with Robert Englund?
It's really weird because it's kind of like, as Chris said earlier on, about meeting kind of like your idols, and I've always been a fan of like villains. I just always have been. any film, if it's got a good villain, it's a great film for me. So, meeting Ronnie Cox, obviously Dick Jones, meeting Tim Curry, meeting Don Caff wasn't a villain, but obviously he was a big kind of like actor I loved as a kid, Ken Cranham. And then the one I really wanted to meet then obviously was Robert. I never had a chance to meet him. I've been to a few conventions when he was there. I just didn't pluck up the courage to speak to him. So then when we finally got him on board on this, and Robert's notoriously hard to get hold of, in terms of obviously getting to him.
Right.
And there's two ways. You either go through his agent or you go through his wife, Nancy.
Okay.
And his wife, Nancy, he's kind of bodyguard, really, Nancy is. She's like the gatekeeper of Robert. So I sent a real long email to Nancy. I got her details, and it was like, a gushing email, but kind of from the heart as well. I'm a kid from a council estate who loves Freddy Krueger and, love Robert's work, and I want to celebrate his career, and, this is a big thing for me to do. And then I got a response saying, Robert, we'll call you on Sunday at 7 p.m. I'm thinking, shit. And I'm thinking he's not going to call. And then 7 o'clock comes Sunday evening, ring, and it's an unknown number. And then I answer it, and obviously it's Robert, and he's just like straight away, just like friendly in his tone. It was really weird. It was like no bullshit. He was like, "Now, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He went, "What do you want to make?" And I said, "Well, I want a celebration of career, blah blah." And he went, "Good," because everybody talks about Freddy. Because and I understand that. I understand that Freddy sells. But I want you to talk about the other stuff I've done, because I started off in comedy and drama, and then obviously I got into Freddy, and then, it's really important. Freddy's really important. We'll discuss Freddy, but please look at my other films. And he gave me a list of films over the phone to look at, and then I ended up meeting him then, going for a meal with him in London about a month later, and it was just really surreal because, and Chris will say the same, I'm sure, when Chris met him for the first time. There was no airs and graces. There was no bullshit. This is just a film fan. This is a guy who just loves film, who's eccentric, doesn't give a shit what he says. Will grab hold of you by and start whispering in your ear and nudging you. It's like fucking hell, like your granddad or something he is. And he reminds me of our friend Don. Don was exactly the same. Don was aficionado, and he loved film, and Robert's exactly the same. So it's really surreal for me. And I think when Chris was talking about meeting people, I don't think I've even still to this day acknowledged that's Freddy Krueger in a really weird way. Even though when I was a kid, I had Freddy Krueger on my bedroom door as a poster, and I had like the masks and the costumes, and now I've got all this shit of Freddy. And I've got pictures of Robert around the house now. Obviously, pictures of me with Chris and Robert and Adam with Robert obviously on the wall and stuff like that. I still don't think I've acknowledged that that's Freddy Krueger. I've kind of disconnected it in a really weird way. I can't, and I think that's really a good thing, really, because I think if I remember going to see Ken the first time at a convention in probably about 98, 2000, and I was shitting myself, Ken Cranham, and I was there shaking with his fucking picture. And now he'll text you and just have, and he'll, we'll meet up with a coffee in London for him. He's done some projects with us, and he's just, an old man who likes to talk, and that's just a weird thing. As Chris said, Chris recently, they all shit and piss, at the end of the day. And we've met some actors who are arseholes, I won't mention names, who maybe, know that we need them more than they need us. We met some actors who are just really appreciative of us doing these things and actually become friends with us because they love the fact that we're taking time to do it, and they love the fact that we're fans. And I think when we're in sitches with Robert, he was just sitting there talking about film. I've got a very specific film taste. I have. Chris has got a little bit more classier films taste than me. He'll watch some foreign films, stuff like that. Mine was very much like horror. Whereas Chris obviously has branched out. So when Robert's talking about film, Chris could engage in that. And it's just two film fans chatting, and it's so strange. It's Freddy Krueger.
He's such a geek.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
such a film geek. Yeah,
he's also he's just how can I put it without sounding like he's just a normal person who likes ribbing people and likes having a laugh, and he'll point at somebody and go, "Look what they're wearing." There's nothing about him which is bullshit.
No,
but Nancy's the one going, "Shut the fuck up, Robert," because she's his bodyguard base. She's the one who protects him because he'll spend all day talking to people.
Well, I went out with my wife, and we went out with like a double date with him and Nancy. The one day,
I wasn't involved.
Swear to God, but it was like what you're saying about him. My wife and I are looking at him and his wife going, fuck, that's us in the future. But she's like, she drags him down, and his mouth will run, and it's got that kind of real crass, not obscene, but crass humor. Oh, it's like a big dick and all this and that, and get excited when saying it. And she's like, Robert, calm down. And I'm just looking at my wife going, it's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any better. I think that, like I said, it's surreal. I think I've at least watched the first Nightmare on Elm Street since we've done this, because it can get a bit like, oh God, I never want to watch these films again, because you're obviously looking for the edits. That clip. So you watch them inside out, back to front, you name it. But I've definitely, we're not trying to be, what's the word, cocky and egotistical when we say, we're just numb to it or whatever. I think in a way it's a good thing, as Gary said, because you can be professional, you can conduct yourself around them. But I think at the same time, I want to try my best to grab back that feeling of like, so whenever we're watching, I mean, a lot of the people we've met are on bloody Murder, She Wrote as guests. It's Ronnie Cox. Oh, look, it's Kurtwood Smith on Nancy Allen or something like that. All these people. And my mum bloody loves Murder, She Wrote. So, if anything like that's on, or Tales from the Unexpected, it'll be like this to Rach. It's my mate. It's my mate. All right, shut the fuck up. So it is, it's always quite nice to try and grasp that, so you can realise the magnitude of what you've been through. But
I think it will hit us. I think particularly this one, because Screambox are doing such a massive thing with this doc. And already, the last week it's been amazing. Guys, the press the last few days with the trailer, and I know obviously I can't go into too much details, but I know the release they're doing for it is going to be pretty huge, really, in terms of the physical releases and the merchandise stuff like that. So it's kind of like, I think that's when it probably hits us, when it all calms down and, and everything's done. It will be like, shit, we've done this. We've achieved this. And I think the other docs are amazing and we're really proud of them. But I think because of circumstances, a lot of it, is very difficult for us to bask in the glory, really, of those docs because of the politics and the business side behind it.
Yeah.
I hope one day we can just sit back and it's a legacy for ourselves, and just go, including Adam as well, 3 film fans who, all from kind of like, working class backgrounds, have managed to achieve something, what our friends maybe in school wouldn't have achieved. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, that we've gone and done this, and we did it because we had the drive to do it. I think I was going to say at the very beginning, I'm the kind of person, I know Chris is as well, if someone says no to us, we'll go out and fucking do it. And that was particularly with RoboCop. Somebody, again, won't mention their names, told us, somebody who had been involved in celebrating the franchise at one stage in a book format, told us not to pursue it. This is not a project you should pursue. No one's going to be involved in it. You're not going to be able to get anybody. Don't bother. And I remember me and Chris had a conversation after what do you think? And we both said virtually at the same time, fuck him, we're going to do it. And that night we emailed Ed Newmeyer, and then that was it, and it kind of rolled from there. And I think that's what you got to do. You got to have a drive, just to do these things. And despite all the bullshit and all the stress and the money it's cost us personally, and I think me and Chris have rowed, our friendship has been on the line. Not a lot. I mean, a couple of times. I mean, 10 years has not been too bad, but it has been because we're so dedicated and invested in doing the right thing. I mean, we've become so close. You can batter each other because you're close, can't you, really?
Fuck off, Gary. Yeah, what did you say to me? I'm telling your parent to fuck off in a different room on the set. You got pissy about something. And all I heard was, what did you say? Boom, boom. And I was like, oh shit, mum's coming to the
room. I think, but when you work closely with people, you can have that kind of side to it. Because I've had, again, I'm not going to go on because obviously time's precious, but we've had conversations every night, until text messaging and phone calls about these projects, stresses and turbulation, And I think one day we'll do a documentary about our journey on these projects. There's definitely a memoir there about how we've got to this stage and what we've had to go through. Really, I think the fact that we're still here today is there's been a lot of casualties on the way. You look at our Internet Movie Database credits of crew over the last few projects. There's been a lot, but there's always been me, Adam, and Chris. At the end of it, it's so strange, that we've never split up. Yeah,
cool. Well, Guys, thanks very much for joining me tonight. It's been a long time coming. As I said, I've been messaging Chris for a wee bit, and I appreciate the time taken to answer me back and everything. Obviously, England coming out on the 6th of June. What do you have? Can you say what you've got coming up? Obviously, I'm still working on RoboDoc, but have you got anything else in the pipeline?
Yeah, we've got RoboDoc coming out, obviously, and that's going to be another massive kind of like thing. It's a 4-part series. Probably can say we're going to, there's going to be a season 2 and 3 on that as well, on the second film and the third film. Mm-hmm. We've got lots of ideas. Actually, when we get all this done, me, Chris, Adam, Hank, and Lawrence, who are our sales producers, are going to meet in London to have kind of like a brainstorm of a project. We are looking at I won't go into too much detail, but another series, about actors, but as a series, and maybe another documentary about one particular director. Nice. So we've got a few ideas. It's getting these puzzle pieces together. I think it's definitely one of them is difficult again, but we'll try our hardest to do. The other one, I think we've got enough contacts now to do it, and I think we get funding for it. We're never going to do it. You'll never see us on Kickstarter or Indiegogo ever again. You'll never see Griffiths production, on Kickstarter or Indiegogo.
Oh, that's it. Get me out the creative.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant as in like you might set me on it. But we've got to stage in our kind of like career path now that we're having conversations with distributors about funding us from the start, really, which we wanted always, really, so Chris can pursue that avenue, obviously, for us as a company. So, yeah, that's what we've got coming up. But again, I think the release of Icon's going to be... Icon's not called Icon anymore, it's called Hollywood Dreams. It's going to be so exciting when you start seeing what they're going to deliver in terms of the physical release and the theatrical and obviously merchandise as well. They're going full tilt on this for us, on Hollywood Dreams. And it's for Robert as well. So, yeah, it's not the last you're going to hear from us, hopefully. And, we're going to start pre-production soon on something else.
Cool. Excellent. I'll just be getting on the email to Screenbox after this then, just bugging them for a screener. That's what I'll do.
Yeah, they are really good at that. They are Pennywise are really good. To say you've spoken to us. They are really good at getting the screeners out. We were... I was surprised how good they are getting it out. They want people to see, and review it. So it's brilliant.
Yeah. They've been good when anytime I've got in touch with them. I think the last thing they sent me was Cube, the Japanese remake. Was that Screambox? I think it might have been.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So
there's loads I need to see from them. I feel like I've got to do this as well because I haven't bloody seen the Out Waters yet. Remake yet.
I think I've heard a rumor they might be going to Europe as well. Screenbox, which is about time, because. You've got Shudder, obviously.
Without sounding like a public kiss ass, they've been amazing. Screambox.
They have,
I don't get involved in that side of the business per se. I'm the artist, but sorry, guy. But from what I gather and from just watching what they do, I'm really impressed. With little experience, but knowing how studios and God knows what historically have treated the genre. I know they are specific to the genre, but like the stuff that we're working with them on is like, it does really excite me in terms of what they've delivered so far, where they want to go with it and how they nurture it. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just a facade or whatever, and
and I think what we did as well, one last thing is that, we had lots of offers for Hollywood Dreams, and we had quite a big offer of another streamer, and we turned it down. And it was significantly more actually than Screenbox, but we chose Screenbox because of their dedication to promote Robert's work and obviously our work as well.
Yeah.
And for us, it was more about how they were going to handle the project. And we were concerned, obviously, with the other company, it's going to be thrown onto a streaming site and that will be it. Whereas these guys really want to promote it. They want Robert in their camp. They want obviously doing the podcast. They're doing the interviews with him. They're doing obviously some screenings and obviously the whole package we're doing. So we've done. We are so impressed with them. That's why we decided to go with them as opposed to another interested party who was offering a substantial amount more. Really, so it's not about going on about. It's not about the cash for us all the time. It's about getting our work out there the best possible way.
Yeah. Is there money involved in these? All this bloody time I've had my pants down. Fucking hell.
Well,
and on that note, Chris, Gary, thanks very much for your time. And Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund Story, is out 6th of June on Screenbox.